Before we dive in, I want to give huge shout outs to community partners Epilepsy Foundation of America, the Danny Did Foundation, and Epilepsy Alliance America. And big thanks to sponsors Neurelis and SK Life Science. Thank you for believing in this podcast and to help keep it going. All right, y'all, pull up a seat. This is going to be good. Hey guys, welcome to What the F. So I don't know about y'all, but I feel like I am constantly saying epilepsy is more than seizures. And I know a lot of people out there are saying that as well. And that's why today's guest is so amazing, because not only is she an incredible neurosurgeon who understands that, but is also trying to change how we address epilepsy in the healthcare system through research so that we can address all of the things that epilepsy involves. It is truly my honor and pleasure to have Dr. Sandi Lam. She is the division head of neurosurgery at one of the country's top hospitals, top children's hospitals. It's Lurie's Children right here in Chicago. And Sandi, I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. I just want to dive into the research that you have going right now. And if you could, and I'm probably going to interrupt you like a million times because I don't have a research brain. It's just not, so I will have a lot of questions along the way. So bear with me because it's almost like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old. But if you could, tell us what the research entails, and then I can't wait to dive into how the potential it has to change how things are done in the epilepsy space.
Thank you so much. Well, this current large study that we're doing is spanning multiple years. I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon, so my day job is that I do surgery to help children with seizures, to try to reduce their seizure burden or to try to cure the epilepsy.
Can I pause and say you're being a little too humble and that people travel across the country to have you operate for their children to help them. And I just want everyone to know what an amazing neurosurgeon you are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I take that really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I operate on people for a living, that is not normal to have your child need surgery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has a baby and brings a child into the world thinking we're going to go through trials and tribulations of chronic illness and of roller coasters of what's going to happen next and how do we make the right decisions for our child, for their health and for our family's future and for our child's future. So even though when we make decisions for surgery, there are a whole bunch of things that we go through in terms of checklists and is this the right thing to do and how do we make those decisions and how do we do it safely, there's all of the other things that are more important for what families are going through and what the patient is going through and how that fits into the family and the community. And that's actually the crux of the research that we are doing now. It is a project sponsored by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. So that's PCORI, and they are sponsoring this multi-site study that is spanning multiple years. So that means that our center, Lurie Children's Hospital, is the primary site really coordinating these efforts across 7 hospitals across the U.S. that are pediatric hospitals. And our study is focusing on comparative effectiveness of surgery versus medical treatments for patients with Lennox-Gastaut Syndrome. Lennox-Gastaut Syndrome is a rare form of epilepsy that is severe and disabling. So it is a childhood onset epilepsy, and it is characterized by multiple seizure types, by certain patterns on the EEG, and neurocognitive development impairment.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that shows up around 3 years of age and beyond and really has to fit these criteria of the multiple seizure types, certain patterns on the EEG and neurocognitive impairment. So families go through this journey of knowing that there's something wrong with their child and then seeing seizures and multiple seizures, and these seizures are very hard to control. So patients are on multiple anti-seizure medications, and then we have lots of treatment options, right? More and more medications or surgery, dietary therapies, and other modalities. And as a surgeon, I think, well, when am I supposed to enter into the equation to try to help the teams of epileptologists and all of the multidisciplinary stakeholders in a multidisciplinary team trying to take care of this really difficult to manage type of epilepsy? So I think about surgery and how and when and what type. And then our neurology partners, our epileptologists, say what type of medicine, how and when. And then we realize that when we work with families and say, well, we're going to do this study, we're going to talk about what type of surgery or what type of medicine, and then we're going to measure things like, are you going to end up in the emergency room after you make this choice? Or are you going to end up in the hospital? And so these are healthcare utilization. Those are things that are easy to see in a medical record or in insurance records, because these are all things that we can see that have insurance bills or hospital records. And the Lennox-Gastaut Syndrome Foundation and the families in the LGS Foundation said, this is great that we are doing studies to try to understand how to treat LGS and how to treat LGS better, and to try to work with our community with LGS and try to do better. But what we really care about is not, are we going to end up in the emergency room or if we're going to be hospitalized again? If you really ask us what we care about, it's actually what we're living day to day, which is, how is the treatment decision of surgery versus more medication going to affect our daily life in what we see in our child, which is behavior, communication, and quality of life? And that really helps us learn a lot about really reevaluating what it is that we are doing, right? So when families with children with epilepsy, with LGS, come to us, it's really about, how do you elevate the experience of living day to day with your child, right? And how is your child going to be able to interact with the family and with the community? And the things that we are good at measuring in research may or may not be meaningful, right? So learning from families for what is meaningful and what is fundamentally the most important when we make treatment decisions together is essential. And we haven't done a really good job of that in research or in science or in healthcare. And we're really learning a lot altogether with our Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute sponsored study for measuring outcomes that matter most to families. And that goes to the ethos of those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So right? So when we do research together.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. I just felt like very validated with that, as a patient, as someone with epilepsy. It's like, oh, right. Like I can help with the solution. I can have some sort of, I don't know, not say in it, but maybe even a say in, what works best for me. I just never really thought about it like that before.
Absolutely. And you have a huge say in it, because it doesn't matter what we're doing research in or what we're reporting if it's not meaningful to you and if it's not something that's going to help. So we're really trying to develop this all together and be able to come up with even the right questions, right? If we don't ask the right questions, then the answers we come up with won't be helpful or meaningful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is like, I don't know. This just makes me feel so warm and good, because I feel like, and this is just me, I'm projecting my own experience, obviously, but like my whole life I've had chronic illness, but I didn't have epilepsy until I was 32. But my whole life has been like, defer to the doctor, defer to the doctor. Never really take my opinion seriously because there's an expert in the room, you know? I never even, like, until this moment really thought about having a say. And not that my doctors are amazing. This is nothing that, like, but just like kind of being asked the right questions. I never even thought about that before. So what questions are you asking? I don't know how much I don't know how research works again, so I don't know how much you're allowed to share or what's going on. But so just tell me if, like, I'm, digging in too deep. But yeah, what kind of questions are you asking families with LGS?
Yeah. No, nothing is off limits. We're
Okay.
not digging too deep. We have a study website where we encourage engagement, and really it's a two-way street. So, and we are really developing a lot of this together with Tracy Dixon Salazar, the director of the LGS Foundation, and all of the families. So Tracy herself is a mom with experience with a daughter living with LGS and the whole family journey. So she has been a huge advocate in saying, don't do research to us, do research with us, and really learning through all that. So the main question is actually also designed by the LGS Foundation and the families, which was, what is a common question that families living with LGS come to at some point in their journey? And that question is, how do we make that decision of, do we add another medication for seizures or do we add surgery? Because most people living with LGS are on multiple anti-seizure medications and continue to have seizures. So there are many anti-seizure medications out there, but every time you try another medication and you add another one, you're adjusting the dose, you're trying to figure out if the seizures are responding in any way. And then do you add more and more? Are there side effects? Are there not? What is worth it and what is not? Then you can think. Oh, yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I just want to pause there
Yeah.
because I feel like that is something that I know myself and so many people I've talked to in the community struggle with, is like, which part is worth it? Because sometimes the side effects of a medication make the medication, even though it may be stopping the seizure, it makes your life worse. But then having more seizures also makes your life worse. So it's like almost that question that I feel like I know I struggle with a lot, when it comes to adjusting my medications and things. And I just really appreciate the fact that this is being taken, that now this is being studied.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, when do you add a medication and when do you add a surgery?
Right.
So, and we know that this is no small decision, right? And surgery can sound daunting and terrifying, but really it can offer really good benefit. And even medicines, right? Like you talked about side effects. I mean, some of them have really bad side effects, right? So this decision is not something that is taken lightly, although we may sound very clinical and practical about it during a healthcare encounter. We know that these are really big deal things, and that's why we're studying this, right? So we set it up as, we're asking this question. One part of the study is actually looking at medical records and quantifying by numbers how much you end up in the emergency room, how much you interact with the healthcare system. The other part of the study is actually looking at the same population with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and actually asking patient families, what do you think about behavior, communication, and quality of life? And that is actually directly by patient surveys and questionnaires. So across the 7 centers across the U.S., we are contacting patient families with the diagnosis of LGS, and we're asking them, we are conducting a study. Would you like to participate? And this is what it means. And it's really asking for parents and loved ones, their caregivers. We're asking for the caregivers of those living with LGS for their time to really give their input and really give their opinions and share their experience. And it will be patients on medications or who have had surgery for LGS, and really quantifying in these survey and questionnaire type of way what they think about their child with LGS and what they think about their behavior, communication, and quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that goes into that, because any old survey is not really going to capture what it means for a child living with LGS who may or may not be able to talk, or may or may not be able to feed themselves, or walk, or go to the bathroom by themselves, because of how severe LGS can be and how severely affected one can be. So there's a big spectrum for how Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and the seizures affect somebody. So some people may actually be able to walk and talk and interact, and some may not. And we actually had to find surveys and work with families to understand what are surveys that can really help capture and define and really let us know the essence of what they're seeing in their child, because it's not quite a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
We had to do this for behavior, communication, and quality of life, and really try to meet families where they are and really understand what it is that they thought would be meaningful to be able to tell us as researchers and in this community, how to understand what was a meaningful change or not.
Okay. So it's really going to the people affected the most and saying, how has this affected you? And tell us
Exactly.
everything.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Everything.
Do you? Okay.
Yes.
I'm so curious, because I know, among like any chronic illness, but there's a lot of heightened emotions sometimes around them. And I'm just picturing someone like really angry writing out like, like this, and then other people just being like I guess my question is like, how emotional are the responses? Or, is it, and does that even, that's probably just me, the empath, trying to figure out how people are responding and how they feel about it, you know?
That's really important, because we're asking hundreds of families to fill out these surveys, and it takes time, right? And it really takes emotional effort to be able to do this too, right? In a follow-up to these surveys, we actually have a second phase in the study. It's called our supplement, that is going to start up soon. So we're going to do the same process of reaching out to families with kids with LGS, and we're going to ask them about caregiver burden, which is the indirect costs of care, or what families go through and what families give up to take care of children with LGS. So that is not just parking or taking a day off work. It's so many things that we have not been very good at measuring in research or in healthcare. So when you look at a typical study, they will look at direct costs, which is really looking at what it costs on your hospital bill or on your insurance bill, or what we can see in terms of those records, but actually looking at what families give up. And sometimes it'll say what are out-of-pocket costs, which are parking, or I paid for lunch, or things like that.
Right.
But now we're trying to dig into, did families have to go from full-time work to part-time work? Did families have to give up their work? Did they have to move closer to the hospital and downsize their home?
Sure.
What do they do for care of siblings and elders in the family? Do moms and dads give up education opportunities to be able to take care of their child who was ill? And so all of those other things that we don't factor in very well and that we don't measure well, we're going to do that in our upcoming next phase of this study, because it is working directly with families to try to understand their experience.
I mean, that's huge. Because again, it's taking something that feels unquantifiable and doing like everything you can to quantify it, so that, well, then I don't know. So that what? So that what can we do with it? Because I just feel like it too, again, it's just like, it's those things we don't consider, especially for caretakers, who do give up a lot. And I think even just the acknowledgement of that is huge, just to be like, we know there's things in your life that are completely different because of this. And for me, that just feels, everything you're saying just feels like a hug. I never thought research could feel like a hug, but it does. Like, it's just very, it's just so thoughtful. And I'm just curious as to like again, forgive my research lack of, terminology, but like the end goal, or like the thing, what we're trying to achieve by studying this.
No, thank you for asking. And please don't apologize. I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to be able to share, to be able to talk about it. Because when you go to school, or when you're in academics, and when you do research, there's so much time and effort that goes into it. And if you look at what is published and what people do, it sounds so impressive and it sounds so smart. But at some point, there's this question, so what? And I really think the so what is really important, because it doesn't matter that there's all this stuff out there that you can look up online or you can read, and there are these big words. The so what, to me, really has to go towards helping people. And that is really hard to say. How does all this translate into helping people?
Mm-hmm.
So my goal and my wish and my promise is that all that we are doing will go towards helping people somehow. And it may not be tomorrow, but that's what I do in my surgeon's life, right? In neurosurgery, I can help people one by one.
Mm-hmm.
My patient that day that I'm doing surgery on, I can help right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Through research, hopefully we can help more people, and more people than I can ever operate on in my career, in my lifetime. But hopefully that knowledge can feed forward and help more people. So that can do so in multiple ways, by producing results that are across multiple centers with big numbers of people, so that we can say, in everything that we can do with good statistical methods, that we can try to answer the question of, at what point should people get medicine or surgery when you are going through your LGS journey, and how does that impact your healthcare utilization afterwards, going to the ER or ending up in the hospital? Or how does that impact behavior, communication, and quality of life as reported by patient families?
Mm-hmm.
So with this study, we should be able to answer that. So we will be done with all of our data collecting by the end of this year. So by the end of 2025, we should be doing all of the analysis and really be able to start reporting this in 2026 and beyond. And then that second phase of working with families to understand indirect costs of care and caregiver burden, we're engaging with families and trying to collect all of that data in 2026, and hopefully able to answer that and start sharing all that beyond in 2027 and beyond. But all of this is not just one and done, right? We're really creating a community and a way to engage with patients and families living with Lennox-Gastaut Syndrome, but hopefully actually beyond LGS, which is rare epilepsies and childhood epilepsies and epilepsies and more, and thinking about, how do you do studies together with doctors, researchers, and the patient advocate community?
Mm-hmm.
How do you design studies together? How do you measure things that felt unmeasurable before? So, in all of these different domains. And then when we learn more about indirect costs and caregiver burden, what does that mean in terms of how we can redesign how we deliver healthcare or our healthcare encounters? So, things like supporting people to have medical insurance, to make sure the healthcare insurance doesn't lapse, to be able to ask, are you doing okay? Are you going to be able to make it to your next appointment? If you can't, should we think about things like telemedicine so that you can have your healthcare provider check on you at home?
Mm-hmm.
And do you need us to help you with paperwork or to think about modifications in how you interact with your employer? Or do you need support and advocacy for asking for additional resources for your child at school? So all of those things
Wow.
we anticipate will be fair
Yeah.
game. And it may not be that we can go to every child's school or every mom and dad's place of employment,
Right.
but we should be able to listen for what are the challenges, what are the common themes, and then be able to understand that in healthcare, we shouldn't just be there for people in times of sickness. We should actually be able to be there in times of health and care, right? So that we are able to
Wow.
anticipate how do we keep people healthy even though they're living through chronic illness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about the child, it's actually about the family. Because if the family is not able to help the child navigate how to live with this chronic illness, then we're really doing the child and the family a disservice. So
Mm-hmm.
we're hoping to learn all of this and really be able to use the results and what we learned from these studies to be able to say, how do we do healthcare better? How do we make medical and surgical decisions together?
Mm-hmm.
But then how do we design the way that we do healthcare better in terms of understanding in our clinics or in our healthcare encounters? What are the questions to ask? What are the resources to offer? What are the people that we need in place? Do we need more social workers, financial counselors, neuropsychologists, or other school support or advocates or educators? And it may not be that you need more surgeons. You may, but it may not be. It may
Mm-hmm.
be that we understand that there are many teammates that can help, including care coordination or role for transition of care. When our pediatric patients enter into adult age,
Mm-hmm.
how do we help navigate that?
Oh, that is a
And
big one.
right, so
Yeah.
there are so many things. And then this specific type of surgery that we are studying for the comparative effectiveness piece of medications versus surgery are most typically for LGS called corpus callosotomy, which is a brain surgery that makes a disconnection in the middle of the brain, or vagus nerve stimulator, which is a stimulator or a little modulation device, neuromodulation device, or what we call sometimes a pacemaker, but not for the heart, it's for the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the most common types of surgeries, but we know there are other surgeries that can also be helpful. Sometimes they're just less commonly offered. So we know that most likely people will have had corpus callosotomy or VNS, but there are also other surgeries that are being offered, like other types of neuromodulation or computers or implants in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and other types of brain surgeries.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like this is pretty groundbreaking in the sense where, like, as soon as you said, like, do they need help with paperwork? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, yes. Do you need help with transportation? Do you need, like all of the just factoring? It almost sounds like for, especially with LGS, but for a patient to have whatever the successful outcome is supposed to be, their support has to be in place. And it just the focus on that I think is wonderful, because I know, again, just from personal experience, I'm a big proponent of talk therapy. Been doing it since college, and so it was included in tuition. I was like, oh well, if it's included, I'm gonna start going. And I had a wonderful therapist when I was diagnosed. Loved her; she's amazing. And then my neurologist said, I think you would benefit from seeing a neuropsychologist who practices talk therapy, because so many neuropsychologists they do cognitive behavioral testing, and then that's it. They don't see the patients again. But ever since, once I started seeing a neuropsychologist who understood epilepsy, my whole world changed. I mean, and it was just so, even just like when you acknowledge that, you said, like, not acknowledge, but when you pointed that out and you said, do they need a neuropsychologist? And I was like, yes, we all do, But I just think, and I was so fortunate to have a neurologist who saw that I needed that and needed that support in my life. And to me, this is just, I don't know why this is so mind blowing, because it seems so simple. Like if a support system is stronger, then the patient outcome is probably stronger, right? But I guess it's just kind of like putting all the pieces together. In a healthcare system, to me, I guess that sounds magical to have it like that.
Yeah. So that's what we're hoping to do, is to learn some of these things, or maybe put together the things that really just make so much sense and that we know is common sense, but to be able to put that together in a way that has data that is meaningful to everybody involved. And there are so many different pieces of the puzzle, right? So healthcare policymakers, government, insurance companies, hospital systems, and all of those moving parts are convinced by different things, right? So we
Yes.
want to have all of the information to be able to speak to and convince and motivate and redesign everything to be able to work for patients and their families. Because we know that even though we can do fancy surgeries or give the best and the latest and greatest treatments and the latest medicines, really it's so hard to actually even have access to that care, right? To find the right doctors, to have the time with them, and to have these interactions that you really take home the right information and you feel like you have the right information to make decisions, right? Whether
Yes.
they're big decisions or small decisions, or decisions just that feel like they're a very, very big deal. It takes time to process, and it can't be distilled into a 15 or 30-minute medical encounter when you're in a doctor's office, right? So, but it's hard to have that recognition when the healthcare system is set up a certain way. So we're really trying to understand the experience, to document that experience, and to come up with data that can help us help patients and their families, and really help advocate and help change policy in a way that works better. And that means help doctors be able to help patients and families, help healthcare systems to be able to really provide care in the way that helps patients and families, and help patients and families know that you are actually the most important thing. You're actually why we're here. But things didn't seem like they all got designed that way sometimes, right? So we're really trying hard to pull everything together. And even though the research is very nerdy and the research is designed in a way that's very nerdy, our goals are to really be able to answer so what for patients and families, and really be able to do healthcare better.
Wow. I mean, when you said you are why we're here, I started to tear up. I was like, oh my God, my heart. Like, I think because for whatever reason, how many, and I'm not going to point a finger at one thing, but how things are set up, I think we as patients forget that. We completely forget that. And I'm so appreciative to have people like you who are out there and like not only doing this amazing, incredibly thoughtful and very curated research, but also being like, but
Mm.
there's something actionable that can happen as a result of this data that we are collecting. And again, this is not a comparison game. I'm just so appreciative for what you're doing because it's absolutely incredible.
Thank you so much. But
Yeah.
this is the opportunity to talk about it together and have patients and families and the community know that this is why it's important, and
Hmm.
really be able to have this forum to say it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, and really the research is better and more meaningful because of the patient family engagement,
Mm.
because the patient family's voice matters, right? So
Hmm.
having that input and having really all the data and results be coming from the patient families makes it so that that's why we're doing it, and that the results will actually be something that patients and families understand it's from them, it's by them, and then we're able to learn from this together. The other things are that sometimes we've described problems for so many years in the scientific literature or in research that it's really hard to connect the dots, right? So we know that it is difficult to live with epilepsy, right? So we
Hmm.
can describe access to care issues. We can describe how it impacts quality of life. We
Hmm.
can understand intuitively and through stories, and with us taking care of people and our friends and families, how this impacts your independence, right? Your ability to drive or, have certain jobs.
Yeah.
And when we look at caregiver burden and indirect costs of care, when we first looked at how to ask this question, we found that there's already a lot out there. So in the US Census, there's actually reports from families in the US Census with families with children with epilepsy. And there's questions in there about how this impacts their household.
Mm.
And we found that about 1 in 4 families living with a child with epilepsy in their house reported that they had to give up work. So they had to go part-time, they had to give up some work hours, or they had to
Wow.
go give
Yeah.
up work in some way. So
Sure.
we call that foregone family employment. But that's a quarter of households living with kids with
Wow.
epilepsy. And we found that it affects women more than men, right? So moms or women of the household are more likely to give up their
Hmm.
employment than the men of the household.
Hmm.
So how does all this translate into our social fabric,
That's what I was just thinking.
right?
You know,
There's so
but
many things that we need to ask from this,
yeah.
right? Or are these our assumptions, right? But yes,
Right.
right? But
Right.
a
Right.
lot of these assumptions then will say, oh yeah, that we could find explanations for this, but I don't want to say that's okay. And I don't want to just
Yeah.
explain it away. I want to say, wait a minute, this is reality. This is reality of trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And this is what we all do, right? I mean, everybody is just people trying to find our way, right? But
Yeah.
how do we recognize that, and how do we put a name on it, and how do we say, hey, that's a thing. That's not okay. And we should be able to anticipate how to work on this, right? And how to help
Totally.
that. We may not have a cure for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, but we can definitely try to understand the journey and how to make the journey less bumpy, and try
Mm.
to support each other and try to make that better.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time we spoke and you said epilepsy is messy. And I thought that was the best adjective I've ever heard to describe epilepsy. And I just think that in all of this data collection, it's again just trying to identify the messy parts because it's really hard. It's like when you walk into a room that's messy, you can get overwhelmed very quickly and be like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know which thing to pick up. I don't even know, at least when you walk in my house, sometimes that's how I feel. So it seems like, though, that's the work you're doing, is walking into the messy room and saying, okay, where can we start? And you're starting with LGS, which I think deserves so much attention, and I think it's just so wonderful to see that there's it's like you're creating order in the chaos a little bit. And it's just so amazing. It's just so wonderful. And I just feel like I'm fangirling out right now. I'm like, I can't tell you how much I just appreciate this. And I'm so excited for people to hear about this work that's happening.
Thank you so much. But it's really not me. I've learned so much from working with LGS families and the LGS Foundation and from my research collaborators. So I'm the only neurosurgeon in my research group, and my collaborators are pediatricians, healthcare informaticists, statisticians, neurologists, epileptologists, and we're all working on this together.
Team of people with different perspectives.
Yes.
And different. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love it. Because it almost sounds like that's ultimately the goal, right? Is like, I know right now we have, like, at some hospitals, we can be fortunate enough to have a team, like a medical team. Not every hospital has that. But it's like expanding the team and, figuring out how to integrate and when you tap that teammate and say, hey, we need you to step in for this patient, we need you to be a part of this. And, it's just incredible. So I do have a question though, because you said you are still recruiting, right, for phase 2. Is that correct? Did I get that right? Or for both phases?
Or both.
For both. Yep. Okay. So if someone wants to see if they're eligible, what are the steps to go through? Someone listening, who maybe has a child with LGS, what can they do to see if they qualify?
Great question. We have a study website, and that is a great way to learn about the study and to see how to get involved. And there are multiple ways to do that. So I had mentioned that the enrollment or the opportunity to answer the surveys and the questionnaires about behavior, communication, and quality of life, or caregiver burden and indirect costs, those are available at 7 sites right now across the country. So you can check, and in our study website, we have a portal where families can check to see if they may be eligible, and then they'll get feedback on that.
Okay.
There's other ways too, because not everybody is going to have their care at any of these 7 sites, but we also do focus groups. So people can give input through focus groups, and they would participate in these discussions and conversations where we really need input on certain questions for where do we take the study next, or what is important to the LGS community, or how do we expand this to other rare epilepsies and other themes that we should study in epilepsy. So that is focus groups, and that is not restricted to the 7 sites. And we also ask questionnaires to everybody in the epilepsy community or the epilepsy advocacy community. So sometimes we have questionnaires at patient conferences and also online and in social media. And anybody is able to actually click on those links and be able to have a screening and be able to have their voice be heard.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to make sure that website, the research website, gets incorporated into the episode description. So if you want to check it out, you can go click on it right now.
There's other ways to get engaged that is not restricted to the 7 enrolling sites or the LGS community. And sometimes we do questionnaires and surveys across the epilepsy community.
Okay. And I'll make sure to drop all of that information in the episode description so people can go check it out right now. Thank you so much for being here. Before we end, though, I do have 3 questions that have nothing to do with what we've been talking about. So number 1, what's your favorite color?
Black.
Well, you're obvious. Wearing it well. I mean, especially with the gold accents, you're rocking it. So yeah, that makes sense. Number 2 If you could have lunch with anyone and like have a conversation, not just lunch, anyone dead or alive, who would you choose?
I don't eat lunch because I'm usually operating.
You're like, this doesn't apply. What is lunch? Okay, so let's just say a sit-down conversation, meal of your choice, or coffee or wine of your choice, whatever if there was just someone you could just sit down who you haven't met and just have a conversation with them.
Lee Kuan Yew, the former president of Singapore, Margaret Thatcher, right, leader in the UK, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh,
so
pick some powerhouses. Yeah.
So, I mean, well, each person is incredible, right? I think the themes are really, how do you lead with intention, and how do you stay strong and resilient and respectful to everybody that you're serving in your role through times of change and big decisions. And when you do that, of course, there can't just be some obvious answer. But how do you do that and work consistently throughout your life and your career to think about how to affect change that is going to be lasting and sustainable, and do that to the best of your ability? And however that turns out is going to be judged. No matter what, there will be people who judge, but how do you know you did your best, and how do you find those guiding principles, and how do you do that to the best of your ability? That's what I would ask.
That's beautiful, though. That's really, really cool. Because I've never really, again, it's just kind of like humanizing leaders, and asking like almost like their thought process and the guiding principles. That's really beautiful. Third question and last question is, what does it mean to you to be a friend?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, because being a friend is really the crux of humanity, right? It really is why we're here, right? We're all here for a fleeting amount of time. So what do you do with that time? And how do you feel, and how do you find meaning in that time? And I think friendship and being a friend and being there for someone in that time that our existence together between friends is intersecting in some way is beautiful. And that's to me what it means to be human. And that can be family or friend, but really finding meaning and love and light in your interactions, and being able to make a difference in that time that you spend together with somebody. That's a friend.
Wow. So when are you going to write a book? Because I want to read it. Just like philosophies of Dr. Lam. Like, that's what I want.
Oh my goodness. I will need some coaching from you.
Okay. You got it. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all the work you're doing. I know I'm not the only one. I'm speaking for the community and say how much we appreciate all of your work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.